A new office tower dubbed the Net recently broke ground in Seattle. This in itself wouldn't be news except for the fact that the building is also being called the world's first anti-high rise. To find out what that means exactly, we've invited Brian Mullenix, the partner at NBBJ, the building's designer, to discuss how this tower uniquely fosters wellness and community. Welcome, Brian. Welcome, Ryan. Sorry, Brian Wine.
That's all right, John. Good to see you.
Yeah, how are you? Um,
Good.
let's start off with the dimensions here. The net is 33 stories tall. So how is it an anti-high rise? What differentiates it from other skyscrapers, and what are its developers, Urban Visions and Mitsui Fudosan America trying to accomplish?
Well, it's actually 36 stories tall, and the reason I
I
want to
stand
talk about
corrected.
that is a
Okay.
little bit of the attribute at the top that makes a big difference. What we found is that when tall towers are built, they tend to be designed first around their systems, primarily a structural system. How's the building going to stand up and withstand seismic or other kind of issues, but also around mechanical systems and parking efficiencies. And they're critical components, obviously, to the building. But we like to think the building inhabitants are important too. So when we started the Net, we started by first creating a healthy workday for the inhabitants that were going to be there. We thought about things like access to nature, visual connectivity to team members, how you encourage people to move, the ability to change your environment for healthy ventilation, and even for an active ground floor. And so all of those kind of came together, and we began to think about how to achieve that then through a system that would encourage that to happen. So we used what's called a perimeter brace frame, which is where the perimeter of the building is connected by a series of BRBs, and that allows us then to move the core wherever we want to. So all the elevators, the stairs, everything that tends to be in the center of the building gets pushed to the perimeter, to the north face of the building, actually. And what that enabled us to do then, as I talked about those upper three stories, is by having the core out of the middle of the building, now we have a 3-story landscape park that is on the top of the tower. It's connected. It has stairs that wind its way through there. Moving that core also allows us to have an open floor plate. So in the center of the building, where you tend to have a lot of concrete, a lot of mass, it's now wide open. So a tenant can come in and really begin to connect across the space and get their teams to interact in the way that they likely want them to. By moving that core, we're also able to put the egress stair on the perimeter. And so now you've got a 36-story stair that has some of the best views in the city. It's right next to the elevator, so you're encouraged to take the stairs versus the elevators. Also, by moving that core, the ground floor is open. And so when you walk into the space, you're not coming into a small lobby that takes you directly to the elevators. Actually, you're coming into a market hall and a work lounge and amenity spaces that are open and visible and can support the types of needs that are there. The last thing I'll say is that when we think about health in workplace, there's the health of people, there's the emotional side, there's the physical side, there's also the environmental side in this building. So moving that core allows us, when we go and think about parking, to be much more efficient. In fact, we were able to build one less floor in parking because the core, now being out of the way, allows for a super efficient parking garage.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. Can you elaborate a little bit more about what your firm and this building mean when they're talking about wellness at work?
Yeah, so it's long been kind of a tenet of how we've thought about someone's workday. We do believe that everybody should have a great day at work and that health should be a part of it. We spend so much time doing the things that we love to do in our jobs that wouldn't it be great to get a healthy benefit to it as well. So about 6 or 7 years ago, we actually enlisted the help of Dr. John Medina, who's a neuroscientist at the University of Washington. He's a fellow of NBBJ, and we've been able to collaborate closely with him to understand the built environment and the impact it has on our health and our well-being and the spaces that we design. So we tend to think about the things you do in the course of a day of work and what we've learned from neuroscience and begin then to employ that in these spaces. So some of them I mentioned before relative to the Net. Obviously, encouraging people to move. Stairs are important. How can you kind of get up out of your chair and move around? The idea of fresh air, which is pretty basic, but not evident in a high rise often. It's often collected at the top and pushed down the building. We actually have air intake happening on every floor. And if you look at some of the studies that lead to the carbon dioxide in conference rooms and the kind of drowsy effect that comes with that, the ability to provide fresh air and directly is pretty powerful. The other things with health that are important to us are organizational health. So how companies, when they come into a building, can really kind of feel their ethos and their brand and connect to the culture. So that openness that I talked about before on a floor plate and the ability to really create a space that is yours is important. And then I'd say the emotional health side is really critical too. So how do you escape? If you want to have a healthy day at work, it's not always about being on. It's not always about being in a vibrant environment. It's about that respite. So in a high rise, it's really tough to find that escape moment. You kind of disappear in your elevator and you're on your floor and there's nowhere to go from there. So having a huge park at the top and an active ground plane at the bottom gives people that choice throughout their day.
Mm-hmm. Now, this building's not scheduled to open until 2024, and notions about wellness could change between now and then. Is the design flexible enough to adjust to those changes if they occur?
We believe it is, and there are a few reasons why. One, I would go back and think about the centuries of how we've tried to bring health into a work environment. We have been humans the way we are for about 40,000 years, and it's pretty basic what we need, right? We love the outdoors, we love nature, we love daylight, what comes with it. It helps us sleep, it helps us kind of regenerate. We love things that move, that aren't boring. And so as we think about those moments, we should be incorporating those into all our designs. So that's kind of the past history of that should be just kind of status quo. But then as we think about the future and maybe the things that we can see and that we can't see, I would use COVID as an example. We didn't necessarily know how COVID was going to impact our lives. We did know that a pandemic was likely to happen. What's interesting to me is when you think about COVID and you think about the challenges to health that it's presented, much of it is still rooted in some of what we know from history. So places have become too dense, right? Let's de-densify space. That's what the net's trying to do. It's trying to create a space that allows you to really kind of breathe and have healthy interaction. Fresh air is another important thing. Access to the outdoors. With the net, I think we've created a framework that allows it to adapt over time to the things that we need, that we know we need from our past history, and the things that are going to hit us that we don't know are coming.
Mm-hmm. That sounds like what would make it different from some other high rises that have some of the features that you've described, rooftop, outdoors, better circulation and so forth. But it sounds like that flexibility component might be the unique factor here in the design and the engineering.
I think that's right. There are some things in the net that you may have seen before. There are some things that are truly unique. I think the fact that we have a 3-story park on the top, people have roof decks, but I don't think there's a way to connect and actually have the different types of experiences and views that you'll have there. But then sometimes without overthinking it, providing people an adaptability, the flexibility to change as their organization changes or as the environment around them changes is just as critical in a high-rise environment.
Mm-hmm. I'm always fascinated by what buildings get called. And, the net at one time was called the Marion because it's near a street called the Marion in Seattle. And another time it's been called 888 Tower. What should the name the net convey to its tenants and to the population at large?
Well, I like you, I'm always fascinated to see how buildings get named. And I'll tell you, this one is really just tied to the truth in its structure. So as we thought about the perimeter brace frame, we came up with a number of different options with MKA, our structural engineer, about how that brace frame could become expressed. We really love the idea of conveying to the urban environment, to the city of Seattle, how this structure was working, how it was unique, how it was different. And so when you look at those brace frames, there's actually a laciness that begins to create the perimeter of the building that resembles a net. And
okay.
Net has a patterning to it. We've actually reinforced it. We have sunshades on the exterior that kind of ripple and take your eye to where the braced frames are. So it's kind of got this undulating facade and then this kind of lacy net structure that sits right behind the facade.
Got it. Got it. What do you think your firm can take from this project when it goes to build other office towers or other high rises that might have mixed use in it and so forth? What are some of the lessons learned from this project?
Yeah, as a firm, we've been long in the debate around what the future of the high rise is. I think back to some of the work you might know, our 10-cent tower, which has two high rises that are connected by bridges. Really, there we were beginning to explore the notion of what it means to work vertically and how you connect people across floors. How do you draw them to different parts of the building? How do you enable an organization to be visible, to be seen, to create that awareness? Right down the street from the net is a project called F5 Tower, and I was able to lead the workplace design for that. And we came up with a 28-story stair that kind of spirals to the inside of that tower that starts to challenge, again, that notion of being isolated when you're just on a single floor in a high rise. All of those kind of build into a larger thesis for us as we begin to attack what the future of the high rise is, and we begin to attack some of the typologies. So thinking certainly about the systems that are in place in a high rise, there's a lot that has been learned over time, but there is a lot that over time has kind of stayed the same. So when we think about steel and concrete and cores, many of those systems are the same. So we see opportunities to challenge those and take them to different places. The other thing I'd say about the high rise that's of particular interest to us is kind of a dichotomy of sorts. So one is when you build a building that tall, it should really last forever. It should be something that doesn't have to be torn down. It should be resourceful. Part of what it's trying to do is take a small area of land and make the most of that area of land. At the same time, it's got to predict what the future is going to hold. And that's really difficult to do. So we've got to create moments for change to happen within that 1,000-year tower. And so the way that we look at it, whether it be the ground plane, because ground planes in our cities, think about how much they've changed just in the last 15 years. How much are they going to change in the next 15 years?
Yep.
To the way people inhabit buildings. Is it going to be office? Is it going to convert to residential? Are we going to have work-live spaces that are totally conjoined in the future? Does it become a laboratory? All of that is dependent on the way that the systems and the flexibility of the system is set up. So we like to think about the typology, and then we like to think about how we can let a building live forever and how we can ensure that building can change when needed.
This goes beyond the scope of the questions that I sent you, but I'm just wondering, when you were working on this project and working with the developers, was there any thought given at all about, the occupancy rates that are affecting places like New York and Los Angeles and Seattle too, I would suspect, and people thinking about working at home more, companies giving thought about their real estate footprint and so forth?
Absolutely. One of the things that we're certainly seeing when it comes to work and occupancy and where people are moving is, regardless of where they are, as many have said, we are social creatures at heart, the way we're wired. We want to connect to people. And so whether you're working all the time remote or whether there are moments you're trying to find time in person, there needs to be a space that you can connect in. On top of that, that space has to be better than where it is at home or wherever you might be working remotely. You want to come to a place that is better than anything you can get in a remote environment. And so when we started to design the net, we were thinking a little bit about remote work. Remote work has been happening for about 20 years. I think back in 2003, 25% of the population was already working in some remote capacity. But as we thought about the net, we thought about all of the attributes to it that were different. They were things that you couldn't get if you were working from home. That was the attraction to coming into a place. And ideally, as we started the conversation, leaving that workplace healthier than when you showed up.
Well, Ryan, it sounds like a cool project. I wish you good luck moving forward on it. And thanks for spending a little time with us talking about it.
Great. Thank you, John.
This is John Caulfield from Building Design and Construction Magazine. Thanks for joining us.